I think that resistance is always our teacher, right? I mean, whatever it is that we are pushing hard against has something to teach us, and at the other side of that resistance is our breakthrough. Why am I resisting this now? What is it in me that's resisting this right now? I think it's an important question. I mean, sometimes resistance is a safety mechanism, but sometimes we can have over resistance as a habit pattern. And so we have to recognize, like, am I safe? And like, okay, I'm safe. So then what is it in me that's resisting this so strongly? But I think asking ourselves these questions is really important if evolution is what we're committed to, if continuing to grow is what we're committed to. We have to ask these darker, harder questions. They're not fun questions to ask. Nobody in the middle of something they're really upset about wants to be like, now what is it about me? Nobody wants to ask that. But maybe the next day when you've calmed down a little bit, I mean, that right there is the teacher that you need.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeanie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation.
Hey everybody, it's Jeanie. Thank you so much for joining me at the Warriors at Work show. So today we're going to talk about our dark side. Yes, your dark side. Your grit, your squeaky wheel, the dimensions of who you are. But we're going to talk about it with Brie Doyle. Brie's been on my show multiple times. She's also been a part of the community for a long time. And I reached out to her to have this conversation because our dark side, our grit, our squeaky wheel, the dimensions of who we are and all of our challenges and pain has made us who we are. And she's leading retreats around the world. She is talking about healing and transformation every single day. She was the best person to talk to and gain perspective and expertise around how you do this work. How do you walk through difficult experiences and come out the other side whole and balanced and healed? And Brie is such an extraordinary person because she's not only hosting these retreats around the world, she's designing her own curriculum, facilitating that dialogue. She's modernizing ancient practices. She's curating rituals and ceremonies, all of which is in an effort to help each person tap into the essence of who they really are and heal whatever needs to be healed in that journey. So we're going to take us down a path of growth and transformation through the lens of our dark stuff. As I'm doing everything in this community, this was a very personal and powerful conversation about the tough stuff. And I really hope this helps each of you to explore this in a way that reminds you of what a powerful and beautiful force you are in the world. Enjoy. All right, Brie Doyle is back. Brie Doyle, thank you so much for being with me again.
Yeah, it's my honor. I love chatting with you. So thanks for having me back.
So what I shared with Brie, which I think is important, I picked the most lighted space in my entire home for a conversation about darkness. So you're seeing lots of natural light on my face. It's all incredibly deliberate to everybody that's watching and listening right now. Here's where I want to start. So we did a lot of preparation for this conversation when I called you and said, I want to dedicate an entire month to talk about our dark side. And for the average bear, they'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Why would you want to talk about shadow work and our darker sides? And you were like, hell yeah, let's do it. I do this all the time on retreats and it's just transformational work. And this brand is also about transformational work. So you said something to me when we were planning, and this is where I wanted to start. You said life is about dark and light. We need to alchemize the pain into power. I'd love for you to elaborate. What do you mean?
Yeah, thanks for starting here. If it's okay, I want to rewind just a teeny bit because I want to get to that, but I think there's something that I want to just say before that, which is, you know, pain, I believe that pain offers us this opportunity for action, this opportunity to make a change in our lives. But I also think our culture really proselytizes positivity. I think,
Mm.
everyone is like, Instagram, social media, it's like always be positive, always be happy. And I think that's wonderful. I'm all about being positive and having an optimistic mindset. But I think sometimes when we deny real emotional pain, because real hard things happen, right? When we deny that, then there's like this disassociation that comes to ourselves. So
Mm.
I want to, before I get to alchemizing it into power, I do think that, there are times in our life where, well, our emotions are here to serve us, right? And so if we're really sad or really pissed off or whatever it is, there's a reason. And if you've ever read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it's fantastic. But it talks a
Mm.
lot about how, if we don't hold space for those real feelings of pain, then they will just metabolize into our bodies, and we carry these wounds forward with us. So I do believe that like pain offers us these incredible opportunities to move beyond, to make a change, to take action, but not before we actually sit and
Mm.
do and allow whatever that emotion might be first. So that being said, I
Allow being a really important word because a lot of times we avoid.
Totally, totally. So, and all of us do it, right? I mean, nobody wants to wallow in their pain. That being said, I do think that, we can overly identify with our pain because we can get significance out of it, right? We can become the person who has a health issue or the person who can never make things work career wise, whatever it is, it's easy to identify as like, well, this always happens to me. And then that becomes a part of our story. So there's a really fine line of like allowing without totally identifying, right? And then moving beyond, like knowing when the time is to like, okay, this has been hard, but this has sculpted me and has triggered the move for something else, has triggered action. And I think you're in a space of healing that pain when you're ready to take some kind of action or do something different, if that makes sense. And that's how we alchemize pain into power, is recognizing like when it's time to take action, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Action.
So say more about why the word alchemize for those people that don't have a lot of familiarity with that word, particularly around this work. Why that word?
Because that's how we make meaning of our pain. Alchemize to me means to transform, really, and again, we can be weighted down our entire lives by the pains of our past. We can tell the whole story of our life, like, I lost my mother at age 3 and therefore I behave like this. Or we can
Mm.
alchemize, we can transform that and say, it was very hard, and as a result of that I've learned da da da. Like, that's how we make meaning. So
Mm.
alchemize to me is transform or make meaning of hardship, right?
Mm. And as somebody, I put you into the expertise realm of transformation. I mean, this is what you're doing with leading retreats around the world, is inviting people into a really sacred space to do this work. And I'm curious, as a leader and an influencer around discussions about this type of thing, is why do you think we resist it so much? Is it fear? Is it just too damn hard? Is it society stigmatizing this dark word, or even this negative, that creating some negativity around it? Or is it perfectionism? Like, what do you think it is? Why do we avoid it so much?
Gosh, I mean, I think you hit on so many of the reasons, but I think that we have this fear that vulnerability equals weakness. And, I don't know about you, but the people who have really influenced me in my own life show their vulnerabilities, and I see that as a strength. So I think it's a shifting of the narrative around what it means to be strong, because we think strong is just pushing through, just grinding, just getting it done, and that's what
Yeah.
strong looks like. But to me, it's like the ebb and flow, right? The back and forth. And I do think you're right. I mean, our culture, like again, on social media, it just promotes happiness, positivity, all of these things. But how we recognize our lives is in comparison, right? Like we have winter and we have summer, we have pain and we have joy, and we can't experience the full range of our emotional capacity if we're only picking off the top, like all the good feelings and like not the bad. If that's really how you're living, then then you're not reaching your full capacity, I would say. So I do think there's fear. I do think some people don't know how to touch those darker things. You know what I mean? I mean, some people don't know why that would offer them relief. And my belief is that it does offer you relief. I mean, to look at it in a safe space offers relief. I always say on my retreats that, to be vulnerable and to be unsafe, that is what creates trauma. To be vulnerable and to be safe, that's where you create healing.
Vulnerable and safe creates healing. I
Yeah.
think that's really, really important, what you just said.
Yeah.
And I was also just thinking, when I think about just interviews that I do all the time, or even coaching conversations that I'm always a part of, or particularly when there's panel discussions, when you're interviewing a thought leader and there's a room full of people, what's the stuff they really want to know is, tell me your flaws, tell me your darkest moments, tell me where you really overcame. But yet somehow in our day-to-day interactions and ways of being, that gets pushed way down. And we present this almost like a facade.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the last couple of years has made the facade a lot more difficult, but which that's the sort of like the beautiful piece, or the beautiful silver lining to this extraordinary circumstance we find ourselves in, is that there's a realness and a humanity that has come from this, where we're having to talk very openly about things that are stuff, our dark stuff, whether it's mental health, whether it's depression, whether it's grief, whether it's I'm just having a bad day, or I'm really unhappy, or whatever it is. It's provided a fairly beautiful opportunity to be really, really human, which was really the impetus behind this conversation. Is like, we need to talk about all of these things instead of just our shiny self, our
Right.
less than shiny self.
100%. And I appreciate that you're digging into these conversations, because like you said, that's the humanity that connects us, right? Is like, we all know what it feels like to suffer, right? We all have different pains, and my pain might be different than yours, but that doesn't mean it's any less intense for me. And the more we start to share these things, the more we say, gosh, I've been through that too. Or if you look at someone that's accomplished something that you want to, and you're like, wow, must be nice. It's like, well, surely there are years of struggle that you have seen, So it's easy to just, like you said, the image culture is really intense. And I think these kind of provocative and tender conversations are what really root us to each other. And that's so important, especially right now after all we've been through.
Rooting us to each other is like such an important theme. It's the whole recognition that you're not alone, you're not weird.
Right.
It's completely normal.
Right.
And you don't need to be afraid of it. And you can talk about it, to your point, in safe, constructive spaces. So I'm curious, as somebody who does this for a living, right? Again, you're my transformational guru. You're who I would go to if I was having transformational discussions. Why did you choose to create retreats to tap into our darker side?
I think that, again, like I spoke about earlier, we all carry these like wounds from these emotional wounds from our past that can be physiological too, that can be in the body. And when we ignore them, they become like volcanoes inside of us, if that makes sense. And, if you can just go in there gently and safely and touch them, you can release some of the pressure, so slowly over time, you're not like this ticking time bomb. Then you become, it takes like a serious diagnosis or a loss or something really intense to wake you up. But I think when you release some of the pressure slowly, intentionally, safely, then, it lightens the load for you to carry, and you don't have to harbor it by yourself, because again, that is what connects us. So I think hosting retreats to have these kind of conversations, it's like a pressure release, and that feels so important to me. I had a client once who she was divorced, and it had been 15 years since her divorce, and she was still like a live wire when, sense it. Like when she would talk about it, it was like, it still made her so upset. And she had so much guilt and so much pain around it. And it was at the retreat that she had conversations, kind of worked through lots of shared what was painful about it. And then it was at the retreat that she decided finally to kind of let some of that go. And she saw him after the retreat at her son's wedding. They shared children together. And she was like, it was the first time I could actually be in a space with him without feeling physically sick. And that's what I mean by like, our emotions become our physiology if we don't manage them. And so touching the darkness that we all have is how we it's like a pressure cooker. You release some of that air. It's like a rice cooker, Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was really transformational for her. And it's great to see that like doing that, it's applicable in your daily life. It's not just something that's philosophical. It's necessary.
Yeah. So let's talk more about that. So I want you to reflect on the last 2+ years now. What a case study for light and dark operating at the same time. So much growth, so much expansion, so much grief, sadness, depression.
Yeah.
And what have been your observations? So for anybody particularly that's listening or watching right now and they want to really sink into this conversation, I'd love for you to share back what you've been observing.
Yeah, it's been this forced situation where we've had to go inward and, totally revamp how we view our work life, our home life. All of these things have been thrown into question. And I feel like this is what nature does, right? I mean, nature's this beautiful metaphor for like we have the winter,
Mm.
we have the spring, and we have the summer where everything is flourishing, right? And so we had this forced kind of winter, if that makes sense. And I think that a lot of us needed it in a way, and I think our culture is evolving. I feel like the conversations that have come as a result of this pandemic, the conversations around healthcare, the conversations around owning our own health, right? The conversations around race, the inequalities that are so prevalent always, but now finally are being like discussed in a more regular light. I mean, all of these things that we have to deal with, like we can't just keep hiding these volcanoes underneath our culture, right? Like we're about to explode. So in a way, this forced shutting down of everything has pushed a lot of things to the surface that need to come to the surface. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've
Mm.
witnessed myself, and I've seen in my own life that like I've had a lot of those like, is this really what I want to be doing? Conversations with myself, because everything was shaken up. So
And is this who I want to do with? Like, are you a
it's
friend that I want to keep in my life? I don't know about that. Are you
totally.
the client that I want to work with? I don't know about that.
Right, totally. So in a way, it gave us this grace period to like shake it up so we can go back in with having thought about what really matters, being more intentional. Now it's easy to slip away from that, but I do think it offered us this really incredible opportunity to kind of reevaluate what really matters. Surely there's been lots of pain and lots of loss too, and that's part of how we grow. So
Mm. I went back to your book when I was preparing for this conversation, and I want to read something, and I want to get your reaction. So, Brie has this beautiful book, "You Should Leave Now: Going on a Retreat to Find Your Way Back to Yourself," and you walk us through the phases of a retreat. And there's a whole piece around old habits, which is completely perfect for this conversation as we explore our dark side. And you gave a specific example of somebody that you were helping, and you offered up these two questions. And this is again all around being open as you're exploring yourself. Is what part of me is resisting this, and why am I resisting this now? So if I think about any time, which it happens often, right? I have a dark moment, whether it's self-criticism, whether it's a flashback of something that happened as a child or something that I'm concerned or worried about. Do you recommend using those types of questions to help you get grounded as to what's really going on underneath the surface? Or how would you recommend those questions be used as you're evaluating some old stuff?
yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that resistance is always our teacher, right? I mean, whatever it is that we are pushing hard against has something to teach us, and at the other side of that resistance is our breakthrough. So I do think like, why am I resisting this now? What is it in me that's resisting this right now? I think it's an important question. I mean, sometimes resistance is a safety mechanism, but sometimes we can have over resistance as a habit pattern. And so we have to recognize, like, am I safe? And like, okay, I'm safe. So then what is it in me that's resisting this so strongly? If that makes sense. I mean, again, we have to, there's a fine line. But I think asking ourselves these questions is really important if evolution is what we're committed to, if continuing to grow is what we're committed to. We have to ask these darker, harder questions. They're not fun questions to ask. Nobody in the middle of something they're really upset about wants to be like, now what is it about me? Nobody wants to ask that. But maybe the next day when you've calmed down a little bit emotionally, like it's an opportunity. I mean, that right there is the teacher that you need. You don't need a special book, a special retreat, a special guru. Like, your lesson is right the heck in front of you. Whatever you're resisting, like, what is that? What's that about? Is this and then you ask yourself, gosh, is this a pattern I have? Do I always resist people like this, situations like this? So that's what's so great about using our experience as our guide, because we can see right then and there what needs to shift, or what I need to step away from, or whatever it is. That's your teacher right in front of you.
If you were in the room with me right now, I would be giving you a gigantic high five. Because with those questions, what often happens is, where else in my life does this surface? It may look a little different, but there's something there, that there's some pattern that if I just sit with it and acknowledge it, and sit with the discomfort or the anger or whatever the emotion is.
Yeah.
And it's life is about joy and pain. You cannot have one without the other. I remember I read that in a great Buddhist book, is you won't know joy until you know pain. So they actually work in conjunction with others, with each other, which really gives permission to, you're both. You're beautifully both. You're beautifully effed up and flawed. All of us are.
Totally. It's like Glennon Doyle's brutal, right? Like, brutal and beautiful. I love that. I mean, everything is like that, right? We all experience highs and lows. That's part of the deal.
You pointed me to, when we were preparing for this conversation, we were talking about different thought leaders, and you pointed me to Catherine May and her book Wintering. So I watched a few interviews with her on YouTube, which were absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And she said something, and I want to say this to you, and I want to get your reaction.
Yeah.
She said, live a life you can cope with, not what others want from you.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's the real goal, right? I mean, if there is a goal, it's like, where am I in this? Like, what do I really feel? How will I really act based on what I know I need? And like, will I self-disassociate, or will I actually stick with it? That's the constant question. We think it's just a high school problem. It's not, it's an adult problem that we carry all the way through. Like, I know this is expected of me, but this is what I know is true and is right and is real. And so I feel like that's what all of our lives are about, is like figuring out, like coming as close to we can, as often as we can, to where our inside lives meet what our outside lives look like. So much of the time it's like the outside, we have this facade, we're putting on this show, we do all these things. And on the inside, we're just broken, and it's okay. We all experience that. That's what's true, is like, not just one person goes through that. We all go through that at different points, but that's a function of keeping us in alignment with what we're really here to do, like who we're really here to serve. When you have those crises of the soul, where you're like, gosh, this worked for me 2 years ago, it just doesn't work for me right now. Like, the question becomes, am I going to listen? Because if you don't listen, right, it starts as a whisper. I think Oprah said this. It starts as a whisper, and then it becomes a knock, and then it becomes a bang, and then it becomes a health crisis. So that's the deal. It's like, you can either listen to what you know is true, or you can deny it until you have no choice but to listen.
I love that. And you reminded me, I talk to a lot of people that are considering transitioning roles, or taking on expanded role, or leaving an organization. And a lot of times they're just broken up about it internally, because, to your point, they're holding up a certain image for the sake of others. They've always done it this way. This is what their brand reputation is about, or their leadership journey is about. But yet inside, their soul is yearning for something different. And a lot of people just don't ever make that change. And there's no judgment there. That's your choice.
Right.
And I'll often say, well, you'll either hit the wall or you won't.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very personal thing, but there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with you
Right.
to be exploring both sides of this. It doesn't make you bad.
Right.
It makes you human.
Totally.
And it's just really interesting then to also see how that persona or those people that are around you that are expecting you to live a certain way or lead a certain way or behave a certain way, whether this is in your personal life or professional life, it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
We've created an environment where people know what to expect of us.
Yeah.
And if you buck that in any way, makes them uncomfortable, then depending upon their place in your life, they can make your life incredibly uncomfortable. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people stuck and afraid to make those changes. It's just too difficult. It's just on the other side of the pain. Well, on the other side of the pain is the grace and the flow and the peace and the ease.
Yep.
But going through it is hard as hell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think I love that you take the shame away from not making the choice. I think that's something to honor too, because, there's like a push to just go through it, just do the transition, but you're right. I mean, you have to ask yourself, like, what is there to lose? And maybe for some people there's too much to lose. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's so different for every person, and you have to be ready and want that kind of a change, but there is always a loss too. I mean, you can't keep everything and have your transformation too.
It's so true. Like, I was just having this conversation with somebody who I really, really admire, and he's considering, traditional big corporate job or something that's in a sort of smaller space. And I could tell by the way he was processing, his ego is very much like, well, based on your academic profile and your professional resume, you're over here in the corporate realm, but your heart is telling you here.
Yeah.
So instead of calling that out, I just asked the question, where are you in your life? What means the most to you right now? Where do you feel you're going to gain the most joy?
Yeah.
And it was sort of like an epiphany, like, oh, joy can be a part of this. I'm like, absolutely. And then we also talked about, where do you feel like you're going to struggle the most? Where are you going to be the most unhappy? Where would you be in an environment where I've been there, done that, seen? Am I really going to grow? Sometimes you're going into difficult situations and there are tremendous opportunities for growth and expansion because it's all new.
Yeah.
But it's just sort of an interesting thing to kind of explore all of these different emotional elements as we're navigating our life. And I think, unfortunately, particularly the more influence you have, particularly in a corporate environment or in a business environment, there's so much pressure for you to just get it right every single time.
Right.
And do it beautifully with no stress, no complaints, and you better show up looking like $1 million every time.
Right.
There's no room for, again, this humanity that I think is just so important. Instead of saying, imagine if we had more team meetings where you're like, guys, I'm having a really rough day. I had a rough weekend.
Yeah.
Not at my best today.
Yeah.
Here's where I would really appreciate some pullback on some things, or just whatever that open dialogue or heartfelt dialogue is. The same way that you're giving people permission to have that kind of powerful conversation in retreats. Just what an incredible place it could be.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard, again, we have these shells, right? We keep ourselves in these boxes, and based on what we think people might think. I mean, we don't know what people would think, right? And maybe sometimes the right decision is to stay and experiment with something else. You know what I mean? I mean, I have a client who, big, powerful job, has a lot of creative impulses and intuitions, but her big, powerful job allows, like, she and her husband to travel everywhere. So she's like, gosh, I'd love to leave it all and cut bait and start my Etsy shop. But the truth is, like, we really love to travel. So I'm going to keep the job, work a little less, and do my creative thing. So it's not like, not everybody is like, you just have to go 100% in and leave everything behind and burn it's just, so I think you just have to check in with yourself, and nobody can know when it's right but you. But my biggest thing is, like, learning to know that voice, learning to familiarize yourself with that voice, because sometimes you're going to have to cut the boats and burn the island. And sometimes you're going to have to just leave a few boats and make sure you have a pathway back to the island, but try another island, and it's going to change. There's not like one rule that you follow every single time. It's like the rule is your center. Like, where are you? How do you feel? And it's like, this is a very kind of simple way that I can tell how I feel about something. Like if I'm contemplating something, like, do I really want to do this next retreat? Let's say, do I have time? Do I want to do this next retreat? I can ask myself that question. And then this is a somatic exercise. If I go like, if it's an inhale, then I know, like, I have the space, I'm open, it excites me. There's a physiological response of joy. Like you were saying, if there's a like, can you see the difference in just one breath tells you so much. Like if someone's like, hey, you want to meet me for happy hour on Friday? Yeah, that'd be fun. That sounds really great. Or, oh God.
Or yeah, that sounds really good.
Like, true. I mean, if you're holding your breath, that's also right. So it's a simple little thing to just take note of, when there's a decision to be made, big or small. Like, notice your breath, notice that initial breath response, because it tells you so much. The body keeps the score. The body knows, you know what I mean? Knows what is truthful.
That is so simple and so powerful what you just said. I had a conversation with somebody who I admire so much. He's an incredible creative director. And we were talking about the expansion of this brand and some things that I want to do differently. And I was throwing out an idea to her, and she said something back to me. It literally brought me to tears.
Wow.
It was almost like her soul was talking to my soul. And of course, we were on the phone, so she didn't know I had an emotional response, and she kept talking. And I stopped and I said, I just had a physiological response to what you just said. Like, that's a hell yes. Yeah. And no one framed it to me the way that she did. And she's like, don't get caught up in the how. Just sit with it. Just trust that you just had the reaction that you needed to. She's like, you're telling me this, but I heard this. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. But I did this. I had this huge inhale, and then it was like just tears started falling down my face. I'm like, you get me. That's a beautiful idea.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. It's a great story. I mean, just paying attention to our physiology, right? There's so much there. There's so much nuance and truth. Like, if we have a hard time finding that voice or finding that truth, just start to notice how your body responds to things. It really helps you. It's there to help you. We have these instinctual animal bodies that are ancient, right? That behave in ancient ways, that have much more sensitivities to what's going on than our mind, which we put way too much emphasis on, our mind, our thinking, right? But if you start to move and pay attention to the body, clues are there. Answers can be found. Yeah.
So powerful. I want to ask you a personal question.
Yeah.
I would love for you to share something about your dark side that's a part of your journey.
Yeah. I thought a lot about this question. I've had a hard year professionally. I've had a lot of questions so I have two sides to me. I have my kind of extroverted, outward, teacherly side, and then I have my inward, artistic, creative writer side. And the two are not at odds, but I have to make space for them both quite a lot. I learned as a young woman I was very well socialized. I learned how to become popular. I learned how to become pretty. And then that was by not going against the narrative ever. Whatever the narrative was at the time, I knew how to like fit in and how to say the right things and how to meet the right people. Like, that's something I learned how to do. I was well socialized. And as I've gotten older and I've gotten more into this work, I've really realized that, like, if I'm committed to truth, then sometimes my truth is going to look different than everybody around me. And what am I going to do then? It's like we were talking about earlier, like, am I going to disassociate because it's what serves something outside of me? Or am I going to kind of come back and make the harder, more difficult choice where I know I'm going to piss people off, where I know I'm going to maybe lose friends, lose clients, but that's a choice that's important for me. And so why it's a dark side for me is because I've gotten better at making those hard choices and being like, you know what, like, if this isn't right, then I'm going to keep moving forward. It's okay. Like, I have what I need. But there is this childhood side of me that's like, I still want to be liked, I still want to be pleasing. I still want to make people happy. I don't want to make people upset. So I think that's something that's inside of me that's always been there, and that might always be there. And it's not something I'm trying to evade or something that I hate, because truthfully, it keeps me, I think there's a balance, right? I mean, if I only make decisions from this side, or I only make decisions from this side, then I would feel like I didn't have all that I needed to make the best decision. But I will say that, like, it's hard sometimes to just go blazing forth with what I know is my truth when it might piss a lot of people off. So,
You talk a lot about that, or you touch on it in your book. You describe a lot of the things that you were conditioned to believe and to behave,
yeah,
and how you're constantly playing with that to say, wait, that's not what I really want. Here's what I really want. Here's what I really believe. I
right.
love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll offer something up
Yeah,
for me too, and something that it's a very difficult subject for me, but it's something that I know I have to explore. Is I can get obsessive about things and hook into the need to fix. So I have this terrible fear of dying suddenly, having lost my mom to a heart attack and my dad to complications of a stroke. I tend to obsess over my health and my well-being and what I'm eating and how I'm drinking and how I'm sleeping. And it can be very unhealthy. So in my attempt to live a long, happy, prosperous life and be around long beyond my parents were, for my kids, I can swing too much into like this obsessive space.
yeah,
But it doesn't just show up there. It shows up in other parts of my life. I can do the same thing for work. I could do the same thing for providing. I could do the same thing for clients. So it's like sort of a lifelong part of me. And it's driven by a perfectionism. I want to get it right. I want to get the A. And I heard myself, I work with a functional doctor around health and well-being, and I take lots of supplements because, again, I have a genetic disposition. That is what it is.
yeah.
And in my last meeting with her, I felt myself selling her on, well, I just moved into a rental and, I had this. And then we are in COVID, before she even opened her mouth to tell me the results of the blood work. And she sat back and she's like, I never would have thought you were that way. And I said, oh, yeah, I want the A. Am I going to get the A this call? She goes, it doesn't work like that. You realize that. And you're a woman in menopause. Like, hello, back it up. Calm down. And it was so great because she quickly picked up on the fact that this is my need. So it's something that I really got to work on. Like it's an everyday battle. It's
Yeah.
the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning. I'm like, okay, instead of saying, wait a second, you were up till 20 to 4 because your dog was wandering around the house. Like I put that aside. No, I got to get the A today. What am I going to do to get the A? So that's kind of my dark side. Similar in a weird kind of way.
Similar. Well, truly, and thank you for sharing yours too, because I think, again, one of the great things about sharing these things is like, it's not a solo journey. I mean, other people have the same kind of tendencies too. So sharing it helps other people feel normalized in their own struggles too, again, because we all have them. So thank you for sharing yours too.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's look out into the future, Brie. What are you working towards? How do you want to influence the world in your work?
Yeah. Transformation is everything to me. And I need to continue and want to continue to work on myself so that what I offer comes not from a wounded place, but comes from a place of power and a place of authentic yearning to help. I think another one of my kind of dark sides is that I have this ambitious, it's not dark, but I have this really ambitious pattern, like go, 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 go. I'm a kind of turn the light switch on kind of a person. So I'm always going and always doing. And I think that comes from my, like, a need for significance. I need to feel significant. So I have to be careful not to have my work come from that place. And to, because people are always impressed with all of the things that I can accomplish. And I like eat that up, I'm like, well, thank you, and that feels really good. But the truth is, that's not always coming from a healthy place. It's coming from a wounded place, a need of significance. It's not always coming from the genuine place of wanting to contribute. And so when I when I sit with that, I still have work to do on myself of pulling back, of continuing to elevate my own consciousness, of making space to read and contemplate, so that when I have a retreat or write a book, it's coming from a place of like, I'm full. So it's not my wounds that I'm sharing with you, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So,
mm.
so that's, personally something I am continuing to work on, so that I want the work that I share in the world to come from a really strong and empowering place, so that other people can absorb it and feel that power themselves and find their own sort of power, whatever that might look like. So for me, it will be through books and through retreats, at least at this point, and through courses and things like that. But it shifts over time. I feel myself really being pulled to go inward. I've laid out all these retreats. I've done all these retreats over the pandemic even, and people continue to show up. It's kind of shocked me, but it happens and it's awesome. But I'm really feeling the pull to like, to incubate, so that I actually have something of value to offer, so that I'm not just spewing crap everywhere because I'm a good spewer.
It's another moment where I want to high five you. That's exactly sometimes, well, coming off the holidays, I started thinking, I think I have to shut it down for a little while.
Yep, totally. And
Mm.
to me, like, those are the people I respect, is like when people are like, hey, listen, pause. I'm shutting it down. I'm taking a step back. I'm taking a pivot. I'm doing something different. I'm moving to Spain. It's like, to me, I'm always like, oh, wow, like that is because it gives us permission, right? I mean, the people who do those like renegade, dark moves, I mean, it comes from a place of total alignment. And to me, that's who I want to be in the world, so that I can help inspire people to find their alignment that will of course look totally different from mine, but just they'll recognize it in me and be like, that crazy thing you just did, I have my own kind of crazy just like that, and I'm about to go do it now.
Yes, to all the crazy. We promote the crazy.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
You've shared so much in this conversation. I'd love to leave everybody with something from your own experience, thought, whatever comes to mind when you think about somebody that's watching or listening and this conversation is resonating with them. They want to get into some sort of action around this exploration. Where does one begin?
So I wanted to share a quote that I pulled that I really love, and then I'll answer that a little more specifically. It's by Michael Hoff, who's an author. It says, if we're comfortable all the time, we become weak. I'm sorry, tough times. Here we go. Tough times create strong people. Strong people create easy times. Easy times create weak people. Weak people create tough times. So I put this in here because to me, it's important to go through ebbs and flows, highs and lows, and we have to toughen ourselves up a little bit. We have to go through hard things to live really authentically. You can start this any kind of way you want, but I would say start with what is right in front of you. Start where you are. What is your resistance? It all comes back to that. What are you resisting and why? What is the message? Is the message, I need to make a change, or am I resisting it because I have some emotional volcano that I need to release a little bit? So where you start is exactly where you are. I would say start there, and then, read lots of books, as much as you can, because then you can learn new things and be inspired by new ideas. Maybe take a course, have a new experience, try something that takes you out of your comfort zone so you can see how you respond in that situation. I mean, our emotional and physiological responses are the exact information we need to continue our own growth pattern, right? We're responding all the time to our environment. I like this, I don't like that, this feels good, this feels bad. The question is, are we listening? Starting right where we are, noticing what we're resisting.
Right where you are.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. What a great way to end this conversation.
Yeah.
Brie, we must have known each other in a prior life.
I think so.
I'm wishing you just so much success. I am convinced 2022 is going to be our biggest and brightest year yet. I know you have a really exciting retreat coming up in Costa Rica in the next couple of weeks. Just continue being you and do this really, really important transformational work. So grateful to have met you and to have you in my space. And thank you again for sharing your wisdom here today.
Thanks so much, Jeannie. I love speaking with you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Warriors at Work show. If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeanie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeanniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.